always like to say that your purpose starts with you. And you being able to step into your future highest potential self's shoes so you can see what she cares about and what she's feeling, right, at the end of the line, I think it is game changer, because that is what starts to inform so much in your actual self. A lot of what we've been talking about in conscious leadership is really starting to step back, right, from our concept of self for the purposes of knowing thyself. If your purpose starts with you, that's where it starts, consciously stepping to that helm so that you can actually start to really just observe that which I believe was put in us for a reason. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And we are really making an impact on that mission here in the summer of conscious leadership. I'm joined by my co-host, Tracey Allen, and we are back in here, just she and I, to pull back the curtains yet again, which we're getting all kinds of amazing feedback on how much our folks are enjoying this new format. So high five on the innovation. But today we thought we would really pull the curtains back on this whole concept of purpose, because this is a word that just seems to be popping up on the play with both of the guests that we've had in so far this summer, right, Trace?
Yeah, totally. And I think sometimes we kind of brush over that, right? And we overuse the word purpose without really being clear about what that looks like and how to really kind of bring that into our day-to-day life, and how do we make decisions when we talk about conscious leadership. So to talk about that some more.
So let's start there, shall we? What does purpose mean to you, Trace? How would you define that?
Yeah, the kind of I like to, and I think this is, really important, but I like to think of, what is it I'm here to do, right? And what is when I look back at my life, what is it I want to be able to talk about, that I'd be able to highlight, that I was proud of, or what others would say about me in terms of what I able to accomplish and how I make people feel while I was here. So kind of starting with the legacy piece of that, right? And that is, when we start there, it just kind of lets you reflect on what is it you want it to look like, or what is it you want it to be for others. And then that helps me kind of like get clear on what the purpose is to that, right? Because then you've got actions or memories or emotions, and then how do I tie that back to like, why am I here? And for me, it's about impact. It's about positive impact for other people, right? And helping other people be the best versions of themselves. Help, one of my biggest purposes, and I came through that by working with you, in the conscious, when we got really deep, is, being able to help corporations, lead human-centrically, right? To really care about their people and not just care about the bottom line and the top line and everything in between, but actually care about our people. And when we realize and recognize that we can elevate and bring our people care and value and see them and hear them, we can actually get so much more productivity, happiness, and engagement from them. So by doing that then will bring up your top line. Will that bring your bottom line up as well, and everything in between? So that was really kind of what I kind of got to on my purpose. But at the end of the day is, why am I here? And we all have special gifts that we have to share, and we want to be able to bring those forward and hopefully help change other people's lives, right? For the better, of course.
That's the ripple effect, folks, right? When we get to show up in purpose-driven ways, we know that that's most likely where we're going to do our best work, right? When we believe that we are showing up in alignment with that which resonates most deeply, right? Internally at our core as being, the things that are most important to us. And I always say there's method to that madness, right? The fact that you and I care so much about how we show up as leaders, right? Because we care so much about the impact that we make from an emotional standpoint, obviously is part of the criteria for being able to really check that and validate that we in fact are showing up in ways that is going to make it count. That's the language that I like to use when I'm taking my clients all the way up into the right. I know you remember this, right? This exercise that we do where we go all the way up, perceptually speaking, as far as the rocking chair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this really cool NLP strategy that gets us to step into viscerally, her shoes right before that shot clock runs out in that final period in our lifetime. And so, yeah, I always like to say that your purpose starts with you and you being able to step into your future highest potential self's shoes so you can see what she cares about and what she's feeling, right? At the end of the line, I think it is game changer because that is what starts to inform oh so much in your actual self. So that was some of the deeper work that we did, right? Because a lot of people, when they come through my door, they just don't even know how to think about such a big concept like purpose or legacy even. And so I just think is this a lot of what we've been talking about in conscious leadership is really starting to step back, right, from our concept of self for the purposes of knowing thyself. If your purpose starts with you, that's where it starts, consciously stepping to that helm so that you can actually start to really just observe that which I believe was put in us for a reason. And that neurochemistry don't lie in terms of when you and I get to show up in these human-centric ways on the behalf of leaders. It's very, very noticeable to us how we feel as an ROI to that. And I would say that for people who get to play in purpose-driven ways consciously, that usually lands as a pretty deep sense of fulfillment. Gallup says that purpose is the #1 driver of engagement for these generations coming up behind us. That's a marked difference that we have to pay attention to. So the young talent, and correct me if I'm wrong, when they're coming to the workspace these days, these are some of the things that they're asking of their leaders. They're actually interviewing the places that they want to give their time, energy, and value to, right? And are actually looking to be set up in these purpose-driven ways where they feel super aligned. Because yes, 70% of work professionals, when polled, say that they consider work to be a key component of their life's purpose. And we can't ignore that as leaders. We get so much of their valuable time, energy, contribution. But yeah, I think this is why we want to start to challenge the collective consciousness in terms of our associations with even the word purpose itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really want to pull the curtain back on and talk about in regards to purpose, though, is a lot of times I'll get pushback on this from the clients that I serve when they're looking to figure out what their purpose is. I get a lot of feedback from my corporate folks that suggest, that it's not that easy to show up and work in purpose-driven ways in a corporate condition. Would you agree with that, Trace?
No, I mean, I think that you have to be ready for it, right? I do it in terms of being able to make that link. I think one of the things that I try to help my people with is to understand what is it that they want, right? Starting with the self, like we talked about, right? And then what is their legacy? And then how can they get deep in terms of how that shows up for them in terms of purpose? Mm-hmm. And then what I like to do is try to kind of make that mission. Here's our mission as a team, as a company. And then how do those fit in and tie into your purpose? Because boy, when you can make that connection for your people, waking up in the morning is so much easier. Mm-hmm. And then you have alignment with what the corporation is trying to do and know where you play and where your gifts are and how you can contribute to the bigger mission. Mm-hmm. And when I can make that case for people, it just helps with the momentum of the team, and people feel good and they know they're contributing and they know where they fit. And then, we're all rowing in the same direction, so to say, and we're all kind of excited about that whole mission, right? So I think yeah, it takes a lot of time because, you know, you can think about a team, you have a lot of people, different ideas, different cultures, but it's important as a leader to step away from the desk of the day to day and spend time one-on-one with your people to really understand what do they believe their purpose is, and then how can you help make that connection to our big purpose as an organization, and then help them see how they contribute and show them their gifts and say, this is why we're successful as a team, because you bring that, this other individuals bring that, and doesn't that align with what you're looking for in terms of purpose? Let's talk about that, you know. But of course, you got to open up that conversation, and that's when sometimes as leaders we get really stuck in the day to day in terms of business wise or whatever your leadership responsibility is. But I want us to remember that our leadership responsibility is really around our people. And it's about taking that time to carve out those important one-on-ones, to have those deep, uncomfortable possible conversations that some leaders might have. But I think it's actually a gift if you can get really comfortable with your people around talking vulnerably around what they're looking for. It doesn't mean you have to solve it on the spot. Just by the way, as a leader, sometimes we think if they ask us something, I got to know the answer. No, you don't. You can come back to them. You can say, you know what, let me think about that. I'm going to just do a couple of checks and readings, maybe check, you know, I need to think about it, and I'll come back to you, and then help them make that connection. Right. And you don't have to solve everything, but opening up that space gets them thinking, and then they reflect, and then they might come up with ideas next time you speak to them. Right. But I think it's really important to make that connection for our people in terms of their purpose, our purpose as a mission, as an organization, or as a team, and watch how the momentum will pick up, because people feel so connected to the outcome that we're looking for, and they know that their purpose is impacting that in a positive way, which is magical.
That's the key. They have to know that they matter and that their contributions matter. And I just want us all to put this through a conscious filter for 1 second and remember that this is what leadership means in 2025. We're no longer responsible for driving excellent results at the front of the room because we know every single thing possible about everything, right? This is very old school consciousness. But this new school way of looking at our charge in terms of leadership 2.0 is like we're responsible for really setting our people up to win, to do their best work, right? And in ways that they can sustain, because there's a huge difference, right, between showing up and doing a job that maybe we're a little bit good at and possibly care a bit about, right? And actually setting our people up to be able to work in these super aligned ways where they're playing to their sweet spot. They're playing to the best that is put inside them, again, for a reason. This is obviously where they're going to be able to step into their flow, right? I wrote an article on this right after the pandemic, talking about how like this whole new generation of Gen Zs and Millennials that are coming up behind our back shoulder, this is what they require from their leaders. Gallup says that purpose is the #1 driver of engagement for these generations coming up behind us. That's a marked difference that we have to pay attention to. So the young talent, and correct me if I'm wrong, when they're coming to the workspace these days, these are some of the things that they're asking of their leaders. They're actually interviewing the places that they want to give their time, energy, and value to, right? And are actually looking to be set up in these purpose-driven ways where they feel super aligned. Because yes, 70% of work professionals, when polled, say that they consider work to be a key component of their life's purpose. And we can't ignore that as leaders. We get so much of their valuable time, energy, contribution. But yeah, I think this is why we want to start to challenge the collective consciousness in terms of our associations with even the word purpose itself. Clearly, this is going to be requisite aspect to staying in the game, and not just staying in the game from a space and place of survival, but actually creating conditions for our people to come to work every day feeling valued, feeling set up to win in aligned ways, where they matter, right? But ultimately where they're going to get to thrive. And I think that has been the through line on our conversation with these human-centric leaders that we've been interviewing thus far this summer, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love the point around the Gen Zs And one thing I have to say it because I think it's reality, and I think from an awareness perspective, which we believe is so important when we talk about conscious leadership, is if you're not aware, how can you change it? And I think that's important that we talk about that some leaders are ignoring the fact that these generations absolutely need to see the purpose. Why is ESG so important to that younger generation? Has something to do with the environment and taking care. Like they will make selections on where they work based on that connection that they can make. That is the same thing as the mission that we were talking about, is aligning that mission. It's like they care so deeply about that they're willing to go work somewhere else that has a better story around ESG. And it really comes down to leadership adaptability, which I believe is so important. I always say to everybody and to my people, it is not your responsibility to adapt to me. It is my responsibility as a leader to adapt to you all. And that is real leadership, when you can show up and see and recognize where things are important to your people so that you can adapt and motivate them in that right, appropriate way, as opposed to just saying, this is my leadership style, this is how I come out, now everybody just rally around the way I lead. That's just so old school, and we need to move away from that. And I think I'm going on a different tangent around leadership, but talk about like this next generation is just, you see that, and they actually make that a criteria if they want to work there or not. And actually, I need to tell you, leadership is a big piece of that too. You and I talk about this all the time. The way we raised our kids, it's much different than the way we were raised, right? We didn't, our parents were much tougher, came from a lot of trauma, and it shows up in the way that they led us as parents. We a little bit less, obviously, and we are very conscious about that, and we've done a lot of work around that. So the way that we've raised our kids is all around inspiring them, motivate them, engage them, let them have a voice at the table, and that kind of stuff. Those are the children that are coming through the workforce. They don't come in to be led with an iron fist, right? They're coming to be heard and seen and valued and want to share their ideas. And if we don't, as leaders, adapt to that, we will lose that talent, And I find it very interesting that people actually don't make that connection between parenting and all these people, most of them, not all, but are parents of kids this age. And it's like, why do you think it's different? So I just want to, from an awareness perspective, I want to make sure we're really kind of grounded on that, because the awareness is the beginning of where we can start making changes as individuals, and being conscious about how you want to show up for your people is where you need to start.
Yeah, well, we're definitely raising the most conscious generation of children that this world has probably ever seen, right? And I think that is a question that I'm curious about. So why do you think that all these other leaders who are at home seeing that play out with their children are still so blind spotted to this very notion? Like, it is a reality that we're all experiencing in terms of how much this world has shifted, even since the pandemic. I was talking about the pandemic a second ago, but that was like a giant wake-up call for our consciousness, right? We were all sent into a bunker, and these are the things that we contemplated in that bunker, right? In terms of what truly matters and what we want this life to be and how we want to show up and orient in it. And here we come into this disruption we've been talking about around AI and the future generations. And it's like, for us, it's very clear to our consciousness that this is where we're at in our evolution. But why do you feel like, with all the leaders that you're working with, that this remains to be such a blind spot for them?
I think a lot of it has to do with what happens at work isn't related to at home. I think that sometimes people don't see themselves as a parent, as a leader, and make that connection that, it's effectively the same thing, just in a different context. And I think the awareness is really missed. I think most people, not everybody parents the same amount of hours, the same amount of, so deeply or not. I think we all have our own kind of like, you know, experience how we were raised, and then we take some of that to what we want to change or don't. And I kind of think it just comes down to like, I think we separate it and we think like I'm a parent, it doesn't has nothing to do with leading an organization. Actually, it's just contextually different, but you're still a leader. A leader is a leader. And you and I talk about leadership. A leader is you don't even have to be leading anybody. What's the definition of leadership, right? Leadership is it's basically anybody that, can be followed or wants to that is followed because they're inspiring. That's what leadership is, right? When you have a following, that doesn't mean they have direct reports. It doesn't mean they live under your roof. It's just is. It's the definition that's the most important thing. And I think people separate that so much between, I'm a mom and a dad. It has nothing to do with leadership. But leadership is just, being kind, going to the store and just being in your own kind of self in terms of making your decisions. That's leadership. That's what you and I talk about too, right? So I think it comes down to like really an awareness and people not taking the time to make the connection of how these things kind of like intermingle and how contextually they're just different, but they're actually the same. And I think it's just, again, you and I talk about stillness all the time. It's just being with self, right? And actually exploring that, asking yourself those questions. It doesn't just come, right, with wisdom. I mean, it does, but it's through time, through exploring and being curious about it, which is something that we talk about. And if you're not curious about it, then it's status quo, right? And the blind spots are there and you can't dig into that. But I think a lot of it has to do with, parenting is not the same as leading, and the workplace is the workplace and the home place is the home, and we separate them. But at the end of the day, it's all about leadership.
Yeah, and I'm going to give an answer that might surprise you, or maybe you'll totally agree. I'm not sure. But do you think that some of it is fear? Do you think some of the reason why, some of the old school 1.0 leaders don't slow down and make space to contemplate is because they're really like afraid of this notion of the fact that maybe they don't know themselves that well, or their self-awareness doesn't run that deep or that wide, because like I think that's definitely something that I recognize in the high achiever mindset, right? When I start to hit them with some of these super high level consciousness strategies in and around who they're meant to be as a leader in this lifetime, as I can totally see their protector parts come up on the play, and I think it makes sense because high achievers, we said, are massive locus of control people, meaning that they are always putting that control outside of themselves, right? And externalizing all of this. But the purpose play is one that happens within. And I do think for high achievers, I recognize it's always a starting point that they're afraid when I start positioning that flashlight inward, because it's so out of control. It's so nebulous. They can't touch it or like hold it. And that is uncertainty, And I think a lot of people are afraid of looking at this, and this is the last thing I'll say, because there's a deep down fear that maybe they don't have one. I'm shocked with how much I hear that when I start taking my clients into this zone or territory for the first time, is that on some level, they actually believe that that is just not a thing for them. But I think we want
Or
to
I was
talk
gonna,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, or I was gonna say they don't want to see it, right? And they don't. So it's not that they don't have one. They actually don't understand what that could look like, or they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different one, but you know what I mean? I think that sometimes it's hard to and I would say the other thing is that they don't know, they don't have the answer, and God forbid they don't have the answer. A high achiever who doesn't have an answer is like
A failure.
yes, And I think that squeezes them into that, because I remember when you and I started talking about it and trying to get me like clear, and I was like, oh God, I don't know, but I should know.
Yeah,
Really,
I
I should
remember.
know. But you had to like, and it was uncomfortable. And high
Mm-hmm.
achievers don't like being uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. It is. But this is why I think we're trying to make the case for what an
Yeah.
incredibly requisite leadership strategy this is going to be. Yes, even in big corp,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that this is going to be our best probability of playing through the disruption in ways that help us capitalize on it and find those golden opportunities for our growth independently and collectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, aside from that, I think it also just comes down to the fact that yeah, people absolutely just they need to understand that this is how it's gonna these are gonna be the table stakes we were saying last time in terms of talent attraction, talent optimization, talent retention. And so I don't know how you're gonna stay in the game as a business if you're not able to attract, sustain, and optimize your talent. I think that's why we're trying to come at this from a business standpoint, but even from a personal leadership standpoint, we want to come from that front too, is
Mm-hmm.
that I have committed my life's work for the last 20 years serving high achievers. And high achievers, they have so much value to bring to this world. And so, how exciting a concept is that for a high achiever? Yes, it's uncertain, it's completely nebulous, and therefore, feeling like out of control. But at the end of the day, when you can actually help these high achievers see themselves consciously and understand the value that is them, understand why the things that they get lit up about or get excited about are values to them at their core, because ultimately like the ripple effect of that,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
this is what I believe has the power to change the game for business, is when we all step into this as leaders, because the model carries the most weight.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can show up in these ways where we're so aligned, thriving, we can create conditions and cultures where our people do the same. I really believe that this is, going to be our greatest legacy as leaders.
Absolutely.
Don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so blessed actually to be able to work in a time and a space where we're even talking about purpose in the context of work.
Of course. Yes. It is almost like it is, feels like a first, right? It is
Yeah.
like only in the last maybe 5, 6 years it's become so much more open to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's good. It's amazing for leaders to be able to step into that. I know, as for myself, being able to be honest with myself about I'm not pretending who I am at work versus who I am at home. I am who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm vulnerable in situations where I feel comfortable to be.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great experience that is, right? To be yourself and bring all of it to work, not just pieces.
Well, that's the purpose play. Really, when it comes down to it, yeah, it's great for business, and we've already made that business case. But this is what thriving means. It means it's good for
Mm-hmm.
our health. It means it's
Mm-hmm.
good for our planet. It means it's good for our families because we bring
Mm-hmm.
our work energy home at the end of the day. And then that becomes a template, a model, a possibility for our children to follow or step into, right? In terms of what they believe work should be for them.
Right.
And but yeah, just even in terms of the collective consciousness, we got so much disruption in the world right now. This is a time where we absolutely need to be conscious about how we're relating to one another.
Absolutely.
And when we're not showing up in ways that are meaningful and important to us, on some level we're sacrificing ourselves. On some
Agreed.
level we're sacrificing our families, our relationships, our health.
Agreed.
And that's the biggest, most important purpose piece for me in terms of why
Mm-hmm.
I want to, express all of my value towards changing the way the game's played through changing and healing this collective consciousness about why we're here as human beings and what this
Mm-hmm.
is all supposed to be for in the first damn place, which is, I
Absolutely.
believe it's for growth. And I know you do too, for our evolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it.
What a blessing to get to talk about these things, these high level conscious things.
Mm-hmm.
But we both have big beaming smiles on our faces right now. That definitely is the neurochemistry showing us that we are showing up in our purpose-driven missions and making it count. Thank you so much, Tracey, for holding space for this conversation with me today. I honestly think we're just scratching the surface. I think this is, to me, what conscious leadership is all about, right? Is like really starting to challenge ourselves to get to that level of our perceptual powers as human beings so that we can contemplate things that are this freaking meaningful and impactful in all of our lives. Thank you, everybody, for continuing to tune in here at the LLP for the Summer of Conscious Leadership. We are definitely in our flow, and I am getting so much feedback from all of you in terms of how much you're loving it. So please keep sending that feedback our way. If there's anything else that you want us to kind of just dig into, like we did with the purpose concept today, you can email me, susan@elitehighperformance.com. For all other Leadership 2.0, conscious leadership, coaching, programming, locker room experiences, you can head on over to the website elitehighperformance.com, where you can find out all about our exciting impact game plays over there. Tracey, thank you so much, and we'll see everybody back here next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.